delighted that we've invited Dr. Selma Lendelvo from the University of Namibia to come and visit us here at Spa and to talk to us today. Selma is the head of the Life Sciences Division at the Multi-Disciplinary Research Centre at University of Namibia. But she also sits on a new board in Namibia that's run by the Ministry of Environment and Tourism. It's called the Nature Conservation Board, and it was only started in 2018, and it's actually a very significant policy board in Namibia that is able to review policy for the whole country that's focused around conservation. So this is a very significant role that Selma holds. We've been working together to develop some research applications. We've got one in at the moment with the AHRC and the German Research Funding Council, so we'll hear about that later in the year. And Selma is going to talk to us about her research in two conservancies in Namibia. They're in very different areas of Namibia, Ehirovipuka and Nyae Nyae. So over to you, Selma, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. When I was told that I must give a talk, I got a bit nervous because speaking English in a native English country should be a bit, in Namibia actually we call it Namlish, that we speak that side. But I hope today my Namlish will at least be understood. The topic I'm discussing today is on community-driven approaches for sustainable conservation and economic benefits. I'm going to do quite a contradictory and complementary aspects of these two communities, Ehirovipuka and Nyae Nyae Conservancy. The topic seems to be quite broad, but I would rather just give you a snapshot of some of the work that I've been doing. And this is partly the Nyae Nyae Conservancies where I did my PhD, and the Ehirovipuka, it's a community that I've been working with for a very long time. So let's go straight to the topic, and I hope I'll manage. Yeah, just to give a bit of background, I actually just remembered now, probably I was supposed to put up first a map and to just locate where Namibia is. Namibia is a very young country, located in the southwestern part, just on top of South Africa, and it gained its independence in 1990 from its neighbor, South Africa. And I just want to focus more on conservation at local level. So before Conservancy, and the Conservancy we will define it later, there were quite major declines that were experienced in communal areas. I will also, as we are going through the talk, I will explain the different land uses in Namibia. One of the common land uses in Namibia is the communal areas. These are sort of homelands for most of the majority of Namibians, created from the colonial era, where black majority have been confined to certain areas, while the rest of the land, and I will reflect it, was more for commercial, private, freehold titleship. So there were a lot of declines of wildlife in these communal areas where African elephants, the black rhinos, the black-faced impalas have been facing major declines. Especially in the north-central part of Namibia, where 50% of the Namibian population is, and when I say 50%, is the Namibian population is about just over 2 million. So almost a million of the Namibians live in a very small strip of the northern part. You will hardly find any large mammals in that place. Just a bit of historical. Before the Namibian independence, there was a law that governed nature conservation in Namibia, which was called the Nature Conservation Ordinance, enacted in 1967, which was amended again in 1975, and it really emphasized on the protection of wildlife, mainly on the protected area management. But around the years of 1975, they involved the commercial farmers, the land that is under freehold, to engage also in wildlife management because of the threats that wildlife were facing in the farming areas. Because, just to mention to you that agriculture is the primary land use in Namibia. Because of this, because of an absence of legal framework in communal areas, that's why we were experiencing these declines. And after independence, as I said earlier in 1990, a new, not really a new law, but one thing that Namibia did, we did not, after independence, we did not destroy what we found, but rather improved on that. Basically, laws that were there, colonial laws, we rather amended rather than abolishing them. So we allowed for continuity of activities in most of the sectors. So in Namibia, what we did after independence, we amended the Nature Conservation Ordinance in 1996 to allow communal farmers to participate in community-based natural resource management. By doing that, it has brought back the connection between the community and the wild. I think one thing that I've omitted was that Africa has a long history of coexistence between wildlife and local people. I mean, historically, you will find that African communities have lived together with wildlife for many years. And I think this law was just bringing back that connection that was missed. And also, I believe that the extinction that I talked about there was mainly because what you used to relate to has now become sort of your enemy, so you rather steal from it, and in many cases when you steal, you are destroying the resource, and that's why there was quite a lot of destruction of the wildlife species. Let me define the Conservancy, what a Conservancy is, because I assume that it's a concept that has been used quite commonly in Namibia. And I thought I should use my dearest friend's definition that she coined in 2002, and that I still see my students making use of. So Sean defined a conservancy as an organized group of farmers living in a common boundary area and related cultural background, as well as sharing the same resource for their livelihoods. And then in 2014, a colleague of mine, who used to be my boss, he and his colleague defined it as a legally organized, geographically defined institution formed by communities and designed to achieve environmental conservation objectives by allowing local communities to manage and benefit from wildlife and other resources. I think they are not really different from one another. It's just that below one was more defining the purpose for the Conservancy, but it's really a group of communities that sees the potential for wildlife management within their community and their group. And one of the prerequisites for any Conservancy is that you have to agree on the boundaries of that area that you want to register as a Conservancy for managing the wildlife. And that's a very interesting process because government does not interfere or anybody in defining that boundary. And it has been one of the key factors to avoiding any kind of conflicts over the boundaries of these areas. So they are of different sizes, and we will see that as we are moving. I also wanted to mention that the Conservancy itself, probably one of the most successful grouping that focuses on resource management and also providing a common identity within the communities towards resource management. So conservancies apply to the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, and they are then registered once they fulfill all the criteria that are there, and then gazetted officially by the government. Now, as I said that Namibia gained its independence in 1990, in 1994, that's where we registered the first conservancies in Namibia. There were 4. They were located in the northwestern and northeastern part of Namibia. These are actually the 2 hotspots of wildlife occurrence in Namibia, but I will indicate to you later on. But of historical importance, the decline of wildlife was mainly noticed even before independence within the communal areas, whereby in the 1980s, communities, especially in the northwestern part, where I guess you spent much of your time a few weeks ago, communities started coming up with a model of game guards where they were looking and monitoring the poaching of black rhino and the elephant. That time was the time also of war, a lot of war happening in Angola. Poaching and the illegal trade of ivory was happening, and also the Namibian government itself, or the Namibian people themselves, fighting for independence. There was quite a lot of chaos, and within that chaos, quite a lot of illegal trading of animal products were taking place. Now, in 1994, this program was really characterized by low wildlife numbers, no benefits, of course, a simple system of management, but quite a lot of excitement about us starting to engage into wildlife management. Between 1998 to 2003, government had to look at ways of restocking these communities with wildlife, just so that the conservation become meaningful, because in some areas wildlife had extinct. And today we find, I would call it effective because communities are engaged. They are engaged in wildlife management. We are noticing increasing numbers of different species coming back to their home ranges, and also management of endangered species. We're probably going to say later, but for now I should indicate that at the current moment in Southern Africa, if not the whole of Africa, Namibia hosts the highest population of black rhino that was recently, still as an endangered species, outside protected areas. So there's quite a number of benefits going to members, and the system have become complex. However, the excitement of nature-based conservation has started going down, and this could be the result that people are starting to experience the cost of engaging in wildlife conservation. Okay, let me go. This picture is just illustrating the different nature-based land uses in Namibia. If we look at the colorful, I told you that in 1975, the law tried to engage already the farmers from the freehold land, and so a number of conservancies have been developed in the country, and that's the top part. And then there's also the community forest. We don't really have a forest. The reason why we are just 2 million is because almost half of the country is dry, inhabitable. So as a result, if you find most of the forest is shrub, little bit concentrated in the northwestern where you find a bit of these trees, but such a this for a Namibian, I was just telling Sean that to get in there, I think there must be snakes, because it's very rare to us to find such forests. So community forest is designed around a resource base, meaning that if a community identify a resource base with good trees, good vegetation that can be conserved, then they can apply from the government to manage that resource and be able to get engaged in offering permits and make a little bit of money out of it. However, the Conservancy is about a community of practice, a community to manage wildlife. And so most of the conservancies today are managing wildlife, but they've also a forest that they manage together. Concession areas, you can see they are not very much and they've not been increasing, but I thought it's good to look at that green part of the Conservancy, how they have been growing. This is really a percentage of growth over time, and probably because they were put on top, I found it also a little bit complex, but it's just to see the picture how the Conservancy have been growing. And then the main dark blue is the protected area. They've also not been increasing much, but quite static over the years, but makes up quite a big number. They cover quite a big number. So let us just quickly go to my favorite communities. I love working with communities. I was telling my colleagues that I started working as a researcher since I was a student in 1996, and since then I've been quite sent to the communities to do a lot of field work. So one of the passions that I have is working with communities and just engaging and understanding the communities. Now, the red spot there, that's Namibia. So the first conservancies, they started where the red part is, and then on the other arm, that's where really conservation, community conservation started. Ehirovipuka Conservancy is located in the northwest. The size is about 3,000 square kilometers, and it was gazetted in 2003. It was not really among the first ones, but quite old now. It's dominated by the marginalized Himba people. Now, I put pictures of Himba people there. Those now, in Namibia, we don't use the word indigenous people because everybody can be considered indigenous. So we mainly classify people that are vulnerable as marginalized communities. So we have the group of the Himas of Atwe that are in the northwestern part that are still living in a cultural way, and they are classified as marginalized community. However, they are pastoralists. They dominated, they have quite large herds of livestock and practice transhumance, meaning that moving their livestock with the availability of grazing area. This conservancy, I was hoping to find a nice map, is directly bordering with the biggest or largest national park of Namibia. There is no buffer zone between, I wish I had the pointer. This is the national park bordering immediately the Conservancy, and this Oshokabare is the main village, so to say, where the majority of the people are staying. Meaning that when you are in that community, you are just a road away from the national park. They are primarily livestock owners, no livestock. One of the characteristics of Conservancy, you should at least, what is the word? You should demonstrate that you will be able to manage wildlife. So in Namibia, there are conservancies that have asked for these rights for managing wildlife, but then habitats are quite limited. Now here, the area is characterized by low population as well, and almost this entire place is an empty area. There are no villages. The villages are mainly concentrated along this side and in the north. And this area is where the Conservancy identified as a possible wildlife habitat, and hence they became a Conservancy. There are no fences except for the fence between the national park and the Conservancy, but it's like a meter height, which cannot stop a lion to jump over. So Ehirovipuka, the names are also coined by the communities themselves. So this Ehirovipuka just means it is a place of wild animals. So it's also part of how you advertise yourself as a community. So Nyae Nyae Conservancy, which is one of my favorite communities as well, it's inhabited predominantly by San community called the Juntoasi community. It is located in the northeastern part of the country, and it is the first conservancy that was coined or registered in Namibia. It's a huge area of, I realize here people use miles. Don't know, I didn't know how to translate that. 9,000 square kilometers. It's a very huge, with only about 300 households that are spread across the conservancy. The only place which is the growth place is the middle, which is Tsungwe, is the settlement or the growth point of the area. That's where you'll find a lot of people, but all over the place is just a small village of a few 30 people, and a small village, you can look for it tomorrow, it is gone because they move quite a lot. These are hunter-gatherers. I don't know how to explain it, but their dominant livelihood is from hunting and gathering felt products. And there has been a lot of programs from the government to include them into the mainstream livelihood activities, like donating livestock, giving them gardens, but most of these programs have been failing because they can leave the livestock there and go look for a nice wildlife meat, and when they come back, the livestock has disappeared. So this is a reality. It's a community that still lives in its old way. It's also classified as a marginalized community. They are the only group in Namibia allowed to still hunt, provided that you hunt using your bow and arrow. Now you can imagine in this new era, hunting with a bow and arrow, and even looking at how scarce the resources are. But they are allowed to do that. So they can travel large distances going after an animal. But the hunting skill is really eroding, it's going down. And also the bow to kill an animal should have poison. But that poison does not go to the meat, so don't worry. So it should have poison, and only few people have also the skill to produce that poison, and that skill is also going down. So the community continue to be quite more vulnerable. On top of the conservancy, there is also a game reserve, which is one of the natural game reserves. The Etosha National Park, you can sleep in a 5-star, lodges, but in this one, it's highly natural. So it is quite one of the most key habitats of wildlife in Namibia. It's not as dry as the other one. They have quite good rainfall in this area. Okay, just a little bit of a snapshot of, okay, how about the right? A little bit, yeah, I think I'm in trouble. Yeah, let's start here. A little bit, oh, yeah, let me start. Okay. Just a little bit of what is happening in terms of resource management in the Conservancy. The Conservancy management plan is the most important or key management tool that any Conservancy should have after you have been gazetted as a Conservancy. You have to sit down and come up with a management plan which describes as to the whole aspect of land use or zonation within the Conservancy, describing the hunting areas, describing the areas for residents and all those things. And also restocking needs, whether you need translocation of animals and why, and which ones and what will they contribute to the area. The utilization plan, sorry for that, I think I misspelled, how you are going to utilize your wildlife resources, the mitigation aspect of the human-wildlife conflict, the water management for wildlife. Unfortunately or fortunately, wildlife must have water. It's one of the major contributors to human-wildlife conflict today, when communities have to share water points with wildlife, and then the monitoring aspect. So plus minus for these two conservancies, between 15 to 20 wildlife species have been managed, where the common species are the elephants, oryx, and kudu. Those are the two core species in Namibia, actually, especially the northern part. However, the zebra and the springbok is quite a lot in Ehirovipuka, while the blue wildebeest and the eland in Nyae Nyae. And I've already said this about the black rhinos increasing. And one of the management or monitoring aspects they do is to have game counts. For example, in Nyae Nyae, they have water point counts, so they sit for 48 hours at each water point. In the map that I gave earlier, sorry for going back, almost all these points, they are wildlife, those yellow dots, wildlife points, and so they recruit community members to sit there for almost 48 hours, and then they count the animals that come there. But in Ehirovipuka it's different. They use those transits to count the animals. So there is a program of community rangers. So the people that look after wildlife is the community themselves. So they recruit community rangers who do monitoring of all the wildlife events on a daily basis and develop monthly events and annual events. So at the current moment, you will know the number of elephant carcasses that were found in which area of the Conservancy, and these are mainly noted by the community rangers. It's quite a concept that is working well. Apart from job creation, it really engaged communities in. And as I also said earlier, these are communities that know their area very well, whether it's in the Ehirovipuka, these communities use the area, they have good knowledge of the area when they are making their livestock, so they know their area. On the Ehirovipuka and the Nyae Nyae, these are communities that go around to hunt, they have good knowledge about the area, and they use that knowledge to manage their wildlife. So there is a conservancy management that is mainly elected by the communities, and then community engagement through annual general meetings where communities can come and criticize everything that the committee has been doing. Okay, just a little bit of facts. These conservancies make a lot of money. They make a lot of money. And the money primarily comes from hunting. Hunting is one of the key resources in Namibia. Trophy hunting, where somebody interested in the nose of an elephant comes and just say, I just want the nose, and they will identify. The government has set up clear criteria as to how the hunting is to be done and which animals to be hunted and which animals cannot be hunted. Especially the old male folks are the ones that are always targeted. But if there is a problem, female one or an old female one, that can also be. So these are just the figures that were provided that conservancies could make from. There's also a bit of, apart from the shoot and sale. Shoot and sale is somebody who wants an animal, but kill it first before you give it to me. But there are also live sales where you can sell an animal live. This is just a breakdown where most of the money goes, and salary and wages is where most of the money goes. We also put in put on monetary value on the meat. So if the hunter come and get the ear or the nose or whatever it is, they don't go with the meat. So that meat is shared within the community. And then there's some running costs. Conservancies have cars to do their monitoring, and they have offices from where they do their work. And then some social benefits like at a funeral in a community or hospital needs, they can assist. And there is one of the most contested one is the cash payments. At the end of each year, the dividend is shared among the members. For Nyae Nyae Conservancy, because it's a small community, people get cash. Everybody at the age of 18 and above, you get like 1,200 for your Christmas to enjoy your life. For the Ehirovipuka, at least at household level, but they are busy scraping out giving cash because it has never changed much. People spend the whole night at the bar enjoying their lives. So just a little bit of description. There's quite some level of employment created. Professional hunters. So the Conservancy enters into these huge contracts with professional hunters for a period of about 3 to 5 years. So you don't use different professional hunters in a year. You come up with a contract. And then in many cases, they will have a place like where that young man is. It's more like a hunting camp within that conservancy, and they will employ some people. In many cases, Namibians are good at tracking the spoor, call it the spoor of an animal. For me, that was it was a very interesting thing to know that a human being can say, no, that's not the animal we are following, this is the right one. And so trackers, almost every professional hunter has a tracker from the community rather than somebody trained elsewhere, because I guess it is not that easily trainable apart from you living with it. At the current moment, we are arguing as to how we're going to maintain this to make sure that we maintain trackers in the country. So this was just the payouts, and then focusing on community and the social, just a description of some of the benefits. We have seen over the years that tourism is really growing in these areas, especially the two areas I'm talking about. From the trophy hunting practice itself, it's a tourism practice. It actually leads to a lot of attraction of a lot of people coming to understand what is happening. Communities also come up with some lodges, craft centers, a lot of game drives, a lot of some opportunities for tourists to come to the area, and that's how some of the money flow into the community. So I thought that meat picture, I don't know if it is clear, that's just meat that was just slaughtered, and so we have to dry it. Meat distribution has been actually, especially in the community of the Sun, it's not that every community or every household is able to hunt. So when meat is distributed from the Conservancy, at least they get to continue with their culture and their way of living. And then a number of gardens have been introduced in these communities just to improve the livelihoods and where livestock has been. And then the local hunting continues. But I put there that one of the core challenges is how do you, hunting in Namibia is based on a quota system. So the game guards that are being undertaken, based on that, the government estimates how much you can take off from that certain population or that certain species. Now, if you tell a Sanman that, you know, this year, the current population only allows us to hunt 2 springbok, please. And you have all those villages. Are you really sure that they only took 2 from the stock that we have? Because hunting to them is like what we do every day, coming to work, making sure that you work hard to get more pay, and for them it's the same. It has been challenging to monitor the amount or the level of offtake that the local hunters do. And also to monitor that they are using really the bow and arrow every time they go and hunt. One of the biggest costs of conservation that I should admit that as the Namibian country we have not prepared ourselves for is the human-wildlife conflict. With the increasing growth of wildlife, we realize that there's quite a lot of unplanned wildlife movement taking place. For example, the elephant, its growth has just brought a lot of problems. It needs more water, it needs to maintain its corridors. We are also growing as human beings. We are also looking for good land for agriculture, and we are settling in these corridors. It has been quite a big loss. In many cases, water that community members depend on are being destroyed. Even household and human lives are sometimes at risk. The Ehirovipuka has particularly had a problem with lions, and still have problems with lions jumping out of the fence, and also just that whole area has been conducive for some reason for lions to grow. And if lion cannot get the wild animals that they depend on, they will have to go for an alternative to the livestock, which the people in Ehirovipuka is the key for their livelihoods. And it has been quite a serious problem. There has been an aspect of how to compensate, and up until now, government believes that we argue that if you say I'm interested in wildlife management, and I grant you that right, how can I compensate you for what you lost while you are engaged in it? So that is where the argument where communities, after realizing the cost, are at loggerheads with government as to, but yeah, take away your lions, take away your elephants, give us the other ones that are harmless, and please pay for my goats. And government will not be able to afford that. So this is the current aspect that we are trying to find. There is now local scheme to at least compensate a certain amount, and communities don't think that was fair. So there's quite a lot of initiatives such as herding of animals and putting them in the ground, and building concrete around water points, and also maintaining water points for wildlife, just to ensure that we reduce stock. However, the estimates that conservancies would give on how much they've lost was almost around 100,000. And if you compare it with how much they get, you will see that there's a little bit of low cost as compared to the benefits they get. So there's quite a lot of support from the government. The government check for compliance mainly. So there are standard operations procedures that the government check for. And then also during game counts, it's actually, okay, wildlife in Namibia does not belong to anyone, only belongs to the state. Unless you apply for a higher level of management, like a game farm where you can have a high fence. Otherwise, if you're just doing normal wildlife management, the animal belongs to the state. Meaning that today, if there is a springbok in your land, you count it, but tomorrow that springbok, when it comes to hunting season, the springbok is in your neighbor's land, only your neighbor can access that, not you. So, meaning that government continue to play an important role in controlling the counts of the animal, setting the quotas, and all hunting related issues. Government have the final say because they own the wildlife actually. You just help manage and you benefit from what is accessible to you. There is a very strong civil society support for conservation in Namibia. There is a body called NACSO, Namibia Association to support CBNRM institutions, and they provide quite a lot of institutional support, financial management aspect. Now, financial management aspect is one of, I didn't put it in this, it's one of our biggest problems. Now, imagine a village have to manage 1 million Namibian dollar. It has been a challenge, and in that community, probably only 2 or 5 people understand what a million means. And they are the ones who will tell them, you know what, we need to bend this money this way, we need to use this money this way, and when that million disappears, they will have to find a way to tell the rest of the community. So financial mismanagement has actually been one of the key. Myself, being educated, I would rather leave my job, or if my job is not doing well, to go and help the community manage that million and enrich myself. And this has been quite a lot of aspects that has been facing the conservation of community-based conservation. So traditional authorities still play a role, although the Conservancy is expected to be led by a neutral body, which is the Conservancy Committee. But in many cases, these Conservancy committees must have like a representative from the... it is regarded as a regional government initiative, so the regional government also play a role in supporting them. Quite a lot of donor communities, research and academic, all adding to the complexity of community-based natural resource management. Just to conclude, I'm going to conclude based on the whole aspects of the study. Some of the conclusions, I might not have spoken about them in details, but really what I wanted to say is that the local knowledge from the cultural practices have been advantageous to conservation at local level that supported monitoring and even the use of wildlife species. I should emphasize that apart from government support, there is really a strong voice of the communities, how to utilize and to look after their own wildlife. Proximity in this specific conservancy to national parks might be risky, but they've been supported in terms of increasing wildlife numbers through the movements. It provided us a corridor for restoration of most of the populations within these areas. So I really saw that, for example, the elephant population that provides much of the funds moving between the community and the national parks have been quite good for them. Land use of local livelihoods and low population, for me, the traditional livelihoods in these two communities have assisted the growth in conservation and support of the livelihoods, and also the fact that they are not overly populated. They are able to manage these wildlife resources, creating favorable habitats for wildlife. There has been income. There is a sign of income and benefits that has been coming to the communities. And in terms of monetary values, it has been outweighing costs from human-wildlife conflict. And the concept for coexistence has been really, with wildlife, by the communities, have been embraced, which have sort of in these areas contributed to the continuity of the program. Any conservancy have the right to seek for deregistration in case if the program is not working for them. But however, the communities continue to persistently manage wildlife. However, drought has been really a great concern. I haven't focused in this talk, but one thing that we realized is that wildlife tends to migrate to areas that have better resources, better water resources, and there's quite a lot of out-migration of wildlife, limiting or reducing the benefit of the communities. Human-wildlife conflict is also highest during the years of drought, competition for resources. And also we have realized that, especially in Ehirovipuka, when it is drought time, communities divert their focus from resource management to really look after their their livestock that are almost dying and move around, and that has also affected my final thoughts. I put in 3 aspects. It was a challenge for me to really say everything that I wanted to say, but even if I've concluded something that I've not talked about, these are my key thoughts for the future. The fact that the program is generating money, the financial management really troubles me. Government has put up ways of how to manage and audit and all these things, but over the years it has been a challenge in Conservancy. Mismanagement of financial resources have been taking place. Community members do not have that urge to take a fellow community person to court. It has not happened. I hope maybe it will happen with our future generation when they are educated, but at the current moment, we know that Sean is the one eating up the money of the Conservancy, but we don't have that to take her to court. And this has been leading, this has been making the program unsustainable and not working well. The whole aspect of impact on the ground has also been my concern. For the past 20 years, the Conservancy program has been moving on, but Sean could testify to that. The community of Ehirovipuka remained the same community the past 20 years. The community of Nyae Nyae remained the same. It seems that the impact on the community is either slow or the model that we have has not been efficient in changing the community, or perhaps it will still come, but that baffles me a lot as to despite all this money that we get, what really did the program intend to achieve in terms of community development over time? Which leads into self-reliance. I still see conservancies that makes a lot of money, conservancies that have systems in place, very dependent on government support to do a lot of things, dependent on the NGO body to do a lot of things. There's very little room to drive the program or to drive the institution from within the community. Somebody must tell us how to do it, how to run our meetings, how to continue the program. And that has been really some of the aspects in baffling me a lot, and I hope that our future research collaborations will take this to another level. In the end, may I please just thank the Bath Spa University for bringing me here, for me to be able to speak English in an English country, and also just to share what we've been doing or what we do in our university. And I really want to appreciate Sean, Ian and team for this support. I surely appreciate it, and I must appreciate colleagues that are here today for coming and listening to this humble talk. Thank you so much.
you've presented with a great deal of clarity a very complex situation that for people living in the UK, in, you know, Newton Park, for example, in Bath, it's actually quite difficult to understand just what the challenges are for people living in rural areas of Namibia alongside animals like elephant and lion and rhinos, and the significance of this program to try and actually bring lots of things together, so supporting people's livelihoods, supporting their aspirations towards the future, whilst also conserving these very significant species that are so highly valued all around the world. So thank you very much for a very, very clear talk. And I just wanted to ask you to perhaps, can you just go back, I think it's 3 slides? This one, no, that one, next one. Okay, Ian, those are eland.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
They are quite a high valued species in Namibia that was even close to extinct. You can see it's a, I don't know if it's showing properly. It's a huge animal, but quite vulnerable because it's quite sensitive to a lot of disturbances from people. There is a book, I don't remember the author now, but he wrote about how they could travel miles once they are disturbed. And in Botswana, they traveled quite a lot of kilometers just to run away from disturbance. So keeping them in a country actually it's a good job done.
And they're culturally extremely significant, especially for the Sain communities. Yeah. There's quite a lot that's written about eland. Yeah, great. Okay, so obviously there are lots of questions. Richard, please.
Well, it's about that cultural significance, really. I suppose my underlying question is, you have, as you described it, these local populations that live within the Conservancy, and you also have the majority population, which is perhaps not exactly urban. So what sort of significance does the wildlife have for that majority population? Does it retain its cultural significance? Do they want to conserve the wildlife? You know, what sort of relationship do they have with the wildlife, really?
The urban one?
Yeah.
I think I should indicate to you that the reason why we see a lot of urban poor in Namibia is because we don't embrace the concept of urban as probably other countries do.
Okay.
So an urban area to most of us in Namibia is a place to go seek economic benefits and bring it back to the village. So people are strongly connected to the areas where they come from.
Okay.
And as a result, that does not really break down how they value wildlife. So we have quite a lot of conservancy members that most of their time they live in urban areas, but they identify themselves. So at the current moment, we have not yet come to that level where we have a big urban community that is purely urban. It's very rare. Irrespective of color in Namibia, whether you are white or you are black, even a white man is connected to a place, a farm or so, and an urban area is just a place of seeking job. Yeah, so that's significance to me.
Terry.
Yeah, I'm conscious that my questions, which there are many, because it's been so interesting, are very naive because of my lack of knowledge of the context.
Yeah.
But I want to ask you about boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say that the people themselves actually set the boundaries of the conservancies?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I do work on John Muir, who's said to have invented national parks. So I have an interest in national parks, particularly in Scotland, where the John Muir Trust resisted the setting up of national parks in Scotland because they regarded the whole of Scotland as being important for conservation.
Yeah.
And if you put a boundary in, then the areas outside the boundary would be neglected. Okay.
Yeah.
Also, there was resistance to the setting of boundaries by local landowners, because inside the boundaries there would be restrictions on development, and outside the boundaries there was a fear that there would be lots of development unrestricted. So now the idea of a national park has been really contested, and the notion of being inside or outside the boundary of the national park in Scotland has been a contentious issue. Now, is it the case that the national park boundaries were already established before the conservancies? Yeah?
Yes, so I think what the Conservancy program is doing is undoing the boundaries issue. I believe that in Africa, and you must correct me, most of these boundaries were really done at a very serious force. You know,
Yeah.
we need to manage this
Yeah.
wildlife. Especially the Ehirovipuka, there is a guy called Hule, Hoole, who did he was quite of old age and did his PhD, and he wanted to know how the historical background between how the boundaries came about of their conservancy and the park. And they indicated how forcefully they were removed within the boundary of Etosha for them to establish the national park. So most of the boundaries of national parks have been done at that, with that force to make sure that we manage the wildlife. However, this history in Namibia is very silent. What we do now is to say that let's get away with that boundary, even if there are fences around the national parks, but let us make it easy for wildlife to move freely in the country to create those corridors. So the issue, there's a historical aspect about boundaries. And it is, if people in Namibia had probably the power like the Scottish had, I think it would have been the same aspect. The other areas like the Nyae Nyae Conservancy between the Kaudum and the Nyae Nyae, they have removed the fence between the community and the national park, because that community is allowed to hunt throughout, and they are not living in a sedentary type of setup, and so animals could move as it is. But otherwise, we are trying to undo that, even though we appreciate that national parks have been established, because that's why we have wildlife today.
So there are different regulations within the national park approaches to conservation that are different from the conservancy on the other side of the boundary.
Yeah. And the interesting example is that the recent proclaimed national park, which is called the Bogata National Park, if I should maybe get that map of Namibia. So where the arm started, arm has started, to somewhere about here, it's a national park. But in that area, there are some people living. So they haven't moved them out. But they can't practice their tradition in the park. For example, the chief does not have power to allocate land. The chief does not have power on how to use the area. They can only utilize the area based on the provision of the protected area law. And that's one of the issues that is happening in Namibia now, is where the ancestral are trying to claim back their land, and they're saying, get us out of this national park so that we could have access to our land and use our resources accordingly.
I think that case is also really interesting, the Bogata one, because the Kwe they formally crossed over, there's an international border basically with Botswana. So the people who are living in the park now have a history that crosses the international border,
Yes.
and they want to keep moving across this border.
Mm.
And then there's another layer on top of that, which is to do with transboundary conservation, where there's an increasing move to enlarge conservation areas so that they also cross international boundaries, and that's also happening in that area.
Yeah.
I know you know a lot about
They have
that.
actually removed the fences around there for
It's interesting.
wildlife to move freely between the, it's about how many countries? 4 countries.
In Yosemite, Yosemite National Park, before Yosemite National Park, the Awani tribe that lived in that valley or moved through that valley, migratory hunter-gatherers, were put in the reservation in Fresno, right? So they were cleared out of the landscape, and the landscape was made into a national park. But then they wanted to bring groups of Native Americans back again as tourist attractions to display traditional cultural patterns of weaving and so on.
Yeah.
So people suddenly realised, oh, there's something missing. And in fact, the very first idea of a national park before Yosemite was actually about people's cultures being related to buffalo culture.
Yeah.
And preserving the relationship between people and animals. But that idea was lost, and it became a landscape-only idea in America.
For example, the connection between the San people and the Eland, for a hunter, a San hunter to be proclaimed a true hunter, or a real hunter, you must hunt at least an eland, not any other species, not even the biggest elephant, an eland. But that is dying out because also the eland is not so much in the area, and a lot of rituals around the eland, how you utilize the meat of the eland. There's quite a lot of things around the eland and the San population, both in Namibia, Botswana, and South Africa. And it's getting lost because of that same aspect as well. But this community never mix, I think, the other San in Namibia intermarried and got mixed children, but this one remained the core San community that has always been.
Yeah, thank you. It was a fascinating talk. I had lots of interesting areas. I was very interested in your final sort of take-home questions about the community development aspect, because from the way you described it, it's played a tremendous role in managing to maintain some sort of balance between the kind of pure wildlife interest and the local community interest, and enabling people to maintain some local traditions in terms of the way they hunt and so on. And the monies then come through a food source which is being put to useful purpose, along with new jobs, some of which I guess are using traditional skills in terms of tracking, some of which I guess will be involving new developed skills in terms of scientific monitoring and so on. So in one sense it seemed to be a very good example of a way in which you could at least support and maintain a particular kind of environment in the broad sense effectively, and therefore it was an interesting question. What more could you hope these processes in a sense might be able to do? You're bringing in a certain amount of income and wealth in new jobs with that, but you're having to balance that with all of the other tensions. And in some senses it seems, I mean, not wanting to say this is just a pure success story, but it's a very interesting question. Where is that whole environment going kind of longer term?
Yeah.
The processes seem to be quite effective at managing to maintain and provide for some of the costs that come from trying to manage wildlife and so on through allocating these new channels of income and so on. So I thought it was a tremendously interesting question. Where, in a sense, is that process moving? Having brought in these initiatives which have enabled, maybe even enabled them to survive in areas where they might not have otherwise done had there been more pressures and so on, more conflicts. But so I didn't really, it was kind of an opportunity to, in a sense, I found it very interesting to try to reflect on where is that whole process evolving to, because the numbers I guess you've got are very small as well, sort of 300 households and so on. So the ability for that group to sort of transform itself and become something completely different, it seems like a very long time frame of that won't happen. So that there's a lot of value in managing to maintain a balance of some kind at the same time.
Yeah. I must actually tell you that this community conservation program is back to the drawing board. We will find the role players are sitting and saying, what did we mean at the beginning with this program, and where do we want this program to take us to? And how did it start, by the way? For some reason, we have all forgotten why it started and how it started. So we are back to the drawing board to really understand where to. All this that we have identified, all this that we are experiencing in the program, how do we sit and really read? Because the program itself is redefining itself, because we can see quite a lot of dynamic aspects happening within the program. But as a regulatory body, the government, where is this process taking us to? I really expected 300 households to be changed within these 20 years. But still, if you look at the condition in which these people are living in, they sleep in a house. Okay, government built some houses, but they can't sleep in a house because, according to their culture, they can't be confined to something permanent, because how do you escape from a lion when you are in a permanent structure? So they use the houses for storage, but people are still sleeping under this type of structure. It's serious poverty, but what type of effect is it that we want this program to do on the ground? And almost I have no answer for this current moment. But what I like what you just did is what I was telling Sean, that we tend to have a lot of knowledge about what we know, what we have learned from the program. But the way you were summarizing it, it made me think, quite connecting a lot of things that I was just mentioning here effectively. And I think this is really what I see being one of the benefits, connecting to people from outside, connecting to learned people like you, and just understanding how to contextualize what we do. I must actually indicate that I have really a lot of, how should I say, I've gained a lot of knowledge about this program, but there's just something missing for me to really, shape and bring things together to say, perhaps this is what I should say about the program. And I hope that linking up people like you will help us actually look at this program differently. Yeah? I was telling Sean that as Africans, we can tell stories. No end, no beginning, we can tell it the whole day. But the whole aspect of what is it that you want to say about this story is where we always get crushed. And we can learn that from our colleagues from this side of the world.
Can I maybe ask a question now? Because I think one of the aspects that we haven't spoken about so much is to do with the external interests in these areas that have been, in a sense, routed or directed through the Conservancy structure. So I'm thinking, you did talk about professional trophy hunters, but I'm thinking also of all of the investment that's come into Conservancy areas, or at least some particular Conservancy areas, for example, in tourism lodges in particular. And the way, we were talking a little bit about this last night, but the way that's actually changed over the last 20 years. Yeah. Because it's not only people living there that have interests in the conservancies and interest in the wildlife, there are a lot of other people who have interests in those areas and those resources as well. So I just wondered if you could maybe add a little bit about that and how that's changed over time and some of the additional questions in a way that brings.
Yeah, I don't know in which way I should answer it, but I should say that the program has sort of attracted interest from external investors, so to say. And to me, at times, the interest comes at the expense really of the value of conservation or the whole initial idea, how the program started. So there are places where big lodges are coming in, making deals with communities and really losing that small value. For example, it should have been exciting for you to sleep in a very small, traditional, community-led campsite, for example, and you will start seeing these type of things fading away. Also, the level at which communities can can cope with the level of tourism initiatives like craft production. It's just, once those big guys come in, it becomes so big and everything starts to get focused on this big lodge with very little dividends or little contribution to the communities. And at the end, you start losing this. And we, as the supporters of this program, both government and support organization, we at times get drawn into this. We start classifying successful conservancies based on these external influences coming in, losing really the whole value of and excluding those that have been just coming into the program to conserve wildlife and to just ensure that tourism at local levels start to grow. We have also witnessed over the years a decline, really. I should say decline, because in the beginning there was an involvement of local entrepreneurs into ecotourism. But there's a little bit slight decline, and probably it's because we put a lot of focus on these big investors coming into the conservancy. We have some conservancies that have really big investments coming in. We have also some hitbacks happening where contracts were negotiated and the community is like, no, but we didn't negotiate that way. No, but we did. Here's the contract. And it's because of probably how they understood one another. What government tries to do is not to interfere most of the time in this type of agreements, because they have pronounced Conservancy to be autonomous. But the whole aspect of skill and understanding and education level of most community members are low. But it's really a problem that has come in with all these big investors who see that economic potential, and then communities start running to that and then start affecting the whole principle on the ground. In these two conservancies, there haven't been so much major of these big lodges coming in, these contracts coming in. I think they have been more hunting focused, and then I think in that case, but I remember most of the interviews having heard of some big companies that would want to really invest, and apparently the government is delaying the process, but I think it's even better for them, because it just makes the whole program to lose the value and to become more focused on these big investments. I don't know if I've answered it well, but
no, that was extremely interesting.
Yeah, because in part in relation to that, you start to get this kind of increasing inequality where some of the benefits of the income goes, and that's actually been a very interesting aspect of seeing how this program has unfolded and how it might deal with the kind of social issues that arise in relation to that. Yeah. Mike?
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for your talk. That's fascinating.
you were sort of touching out on the issue of the, I guess, the sort of both the financial viability and the sort of social effectiveness of conservancies in the sense of how, to what extent the system is benefiting the local people over time, and you've sort of shared a sense that perhaps it's not always as much as it could be, and there's a sort of complexity to that, and I know that, connected with that is the sort of rather highly charged debate about the extent to which trophy hunting is an essential part of that, and sort of strongly held views on both sides about whether or not conservancies might be viable without trophy hunting, and it might be helpful just in sort of parentheses to sort of explain that the figures that you've kindly provided, that people may not be aware of the exchange rate. So when you mentioned, for instance, the cash payout to Nyae Nyae residents of $400 million.
And that was nearly $1.5 million at Nyae Nyae. Yeah.
Yeah, 400 per head.
Oh, 400 per head, yeah.
Yeah, so that's per person. So just in case people are not aware, that's actually about £25 a year per person.
That comes as cash direct.
That's the cash, and I know there's other benefits and meat and so forth. But people are also sometimes puzzled, aren't they, and as to how there's a big disparity between that and the levels of money involved in the sort of hunting operation, and indeed in the lodge operations where tourists will come and pay hundreds of pounds per night per person to stay there.
Yeah.
So, what did you say?
I mean, and that is where the whole direct benefit to the community is, even the salaries that they get is more or less the same, 1,200 per month. That's how much. And for the pounds,
that is, it's less than £100.
Yeah, that's now the well-paid staff of the Conservancy. It just shows that monetary-wise, the direct benefit to community members is very, very insignificant as compared to, for example, last year, a lion was on trophy, handed for trophy in Ehirovipuka, and they got 100,000 for one lion, Namibian dollars. I mean, it's a lot of money from just handing one, but what comes to the community is very small. We have been wondering how we could transform this, but on the other side, it's probably because this community conservation program started donor funded. Okay, when it started, the donors came in with a lot of money, and they drew a picture that a conservancy is run with big cars, with big offices, with big activities. And I think a lot of conservancies are trying to use most of the money they get to run the conservancy the same way it was run when it was under, and then only prioritize the communities. And I think that is why things are not changing. People are really benefiting very little on this program. The impact is very, very small. Of course, there has been community programs like sending people to study. A few of the community members, they can go to the university. There is one community, it has only, I don't know how many, the Oyster Teufelfontein makes a lot of money. It's a World Heritage Area, and they have sent a lot of their children to school, which is good for the economy, for the community. But also none of these kids come back to serve the community. They get jobs out there. And also one actually interesting thing is that a lot of these people that get trained by the community in the program go and start working for government, to start all over again training, and in many cases that's where the management comes, said issue. So the program has a lot of challenges, that need to be redesigned. The program has also tried they have been allowed to be autonomous while it is not yet ready for that, and as a result, it has been just at the expense of the poor. That's how I see it.
Yeah, thank you. Very really interesting talk. And I guess it's kind of at the first phase, isn't it? And in some ways, it's amazing to see the government collaborating with the communities in that way. And so that's fabulous to see. I was thinking about how important that skills development is, and I was just wondering about how much, well, what would happen if the money coming back went to the community rather than individuals, or if it was more like it seems maybe some of those micro loan and other projects that I've heard about in some rural areas, whether there was a more community approach and skills training on the participation and the decision making and the input of understanding money, the difference that would make to the community, and that maybe there was some kind of regulation within the criteria that the government has that some of the money has to be spent on some of that.
Yeah. There's quite a lot of, there are NGOs currently, a few ones, that their focus is just developing the skills of community members. I shouldn't be too naive. I should say actually this program has assisted community development on the ground. It's not all the conservancies that are bad in management of funds. There has been some impact. So there's quite a lot of community development initiatives. But it's good that you mentioned the regulations for financial management. That's where I saw government going back to the drawing board. What happened, I was telling Sean what happened a few years, one conservancy was really destroying the resources of the conservancy. So government decided to take on the management of the money. And there were some clever guys in that conservancy and realized that legal-wise, it's illegal for what the government is doing. So they challenged the government actually. So what the government is doing now is finding loopholes in the law, I guess, before the amendment, to ensure that there is strict management of funds. And that's where they are busy with auditors to find the best way of prescribing financial management within the conservancies. That is sort of across the board. But otherwise, I think the program has assisted in some development of skills on the ground, at least when you go to some communities and talk about auditing, there is a good understanding of what is meant by that. One thing that I've realized also that we haven't been focusing on, what we used to do is, if a committee comes on board, we train that committee, forgetting the community at large, realizing that those people that we train sometimes leave for better jobs, and we have to start retraining again. I think one key thing that you just mentioned is really focusing on the community and just make it a program to make sure that we train communities in most of these aspects.
Yeah, it reminds me, I examined a PhD the other year by Caroline Stam. I don't know if you know her, but anyway, she worked in also 2 conservancies in Namibia, and one of her main findings was that a lot of the NGO support for the conservancies went on trainings, so people were going on trainings repeatedly, because the NGOs themselves, in their how they can access donor funding, is to say they're doing capacity building. So you have this whole kind of ecosystem of organisations and requirements that means then people go on all of these trainings, they're overtrained in some respects. And then of course people can't get the income levels that they anticipate they will get because they've been trained and trained and trained. And so then they leave and they go to other organisations that will pay them more. So all of that investment that's actually been designed to support the programme actually leaves the programme. It's quite an interesting structural issue, yeah. Anyway,
so I must indicate that the program could achieve this much probably because of the favorable environment in Namibia. Having such a small population, it's easier to control, it's easier to assess most of these things, and that has been an advantage, and we just hope that the little that we are successful, a lot of African countries can actually learn from that. It is possible for local management of wildlife to be a success if we could just put proper processes in place to ensure sustainability.
On that note, positive note, I'd just like to thank you again, Selma, for a very clear and interesting talk. It's been fantastic to travel back to Namibia. Thank you everybody for coming.